Employers of Reddit, what is the weirdest excuse an employee gave you for not showing up to work that turned out to be true? She was stuck in traffic and about 15 minutes late because an elephant was being moved across the parking lot. I once came too late to my first day of work at my new employer because my train took a wrong turn and ended up in a totally different city. Try explaining that. New employee got hit by a car first day of work. Never showed up that day, but he called in the next day. He settled with the driver that hit him and bought a BMW or something with the money. His 13-year-old daughter died in her sleep. To this day I can still hear his sobbing as if it had happened yesterday. I never got full details, but it was some complication due to her asthma. I just don't feel good, you know? I can't explain it, but I just feel weird. Poor Ducker was in the middle of complete organ failure. Had him stay home and told him to get to a doctor. Never made it and died in his sleep at home. I've posted this before. A guy called us and said there is a bomb in my yard and the cops won't let me leave. Everyone was like, oh yeah, sure thing, Paul. It'll be goddamned if they didn't have to call the bomb squad to his house. It was all over the news. Sorry, Paul. Weirdest one. Girl calls me from an unknown number. Like very different digits than what I'm used to seeing, but it's my work phone, so I figure it's legit. Hey boss, I won't be able to make it into work tomorrow. Possibly the next few days. How come? Volcano erupted nearby and my flight has been grounded. What? Seriously? Yup. Turn on the news. Well, okay then. Call me when you get back. Saddest one was when a guy called in and said he couldn't make it in because his wife just lost their twins like 2 weeks before the due date. I remember him saying it pretty casually and that he'd call in later about tomorrow's shift. I was just stunned. I couldn't believe it. I told him to go spend some time with his wife and was taking him off the schedule for 2 weeks. He broke down after that and just started crying uncontrollably. I gave him the number to one of those counseling services that's offered through our company, but man, I can still remember how absolutely broken he was. He was never the same when he came back too. Still a great employee, but definitely a much more solemn person after that. Well, one time I had to call in cause my house was burning down. There's a dead body in my house. Turned out her roommate's brother was misdiagnosed with asthma when he had pneumonia. She tried to come in after to work. I sent her to go get a beer and her nails done. Not sure if this counts, but an old employee who used to run his own company used to be a real hard ass. You better be dying if you call and type. He had an employee call in and tell him, boss, I met a woman and I'm going to be spending the day in bed. He let him stay home. I gave a weird excuse my boss didn't believe. My grandmother had ALS and was in her final days. I asked for a few days off. She was hanging on longer than anyone thought she would. Day I was set to go back. My grandfather had a heart attack and died instantly. My boss just kept saying, I thought your grandma was sick. 2 days later, my grandmother did pass. I'm an employer, but this wasn't my employee. It was a co-worker at the time. Co-worker called in around 9:30. Work started at 8:30, saying they'd been in a motorcycle accident, had fractured their foot, and were heading home from the hospital. Were planning to come in the afternoon. Fair enough. Called in about 2.5 hours later saying they'd been T-boned on the way out of their neighborhood and wouldn't be in for the rest of the day. It was all true. Worst day ever. 10ish years ago, I had a young adult friend who got an internship where I was working. Came in the morning. Started complaining about feeling like he had been kicked in the balls. We had a 2-day staff retreat up in the mountains, and he didn't show up to the carpool situation to head out later that day. About halfway to the retreat, we heard that he was feeling sick. We all kinda rolled our eyes and annoyedly joked around about how he was a young dude who just didn't want to go on the retreat and was bailing. No phone reception at the retreat. We get home from the retreat and receive several messages from his parents. Poor guy had been diagnosed with testicular cancer over the weekend and had been taken in for emergency surgery to remove the testicle and several lymph nodes and would be starting chemo shortly after recovery from surgery. Dude made it through treatment and is doing fine to this day. I technically was already at work and left early for this. I went to my supervisor's office, where I work. Each department is broken into two, wrapping and makeup. I work at a snack production plan. Makeup makes said snack. Wrapping wraps it and sends it on its way on the trucks. So, in the office is my boss, and the makeup boss, super chill guy. It went like this. I need to leave. Me. Why wrapping? I have a situation that I need to take care of. Immediately. Ow. Me. Did you it yourself makeup? Way too excited about it. I might add, my hemorrhoids have ruptured. I have about 5 minutes before the blood soaks into my pants. I need to go. Me. Get the duck home. Both bosses. I didn't try to keep it secret, as I don't care, but it was kinda funny for a few days being the guy whose asshole exploded. Edit. Good to know my highest comment ever is about my asshole. Never change. Reddit. Edit 2. Second guild of the day, and this one for my ass. Your generosity knows no bounds. Reddit. My dad got hit by a bus. I have to go identify his body for the police. Yeah, I ended up giving him a ride to the hospital because he didn't have a vehicle and I could not reconcile making him ride a city bus when his dad was just killed by another city bus. Edit. Thanks for all the upvotes. This was just one of 3 instances that will stick with me forever. The other 2 were not strange though, so they don't qualify. Got this TXT the other day. Hey, my brother's cat died. I have to go to the funeral. Apparently his brother was autistic, wouldn't let them take the cat unless they agreed to a funeral for it. So instead of letting him clutch a deceased pet, they agreed to demands. I almost didn't believe him till he showed me a picture of him in a suit with his family and a shoebox. I didn't give him any problems because the dude is a good brother. This happened to me. I had to call in late because the door fell off my apartment. I went to leave for work, closed it behind me, and heard a loud crash. The hinges had come unscrewed and fallen off. Since I couldn't leave my apartment without a door and I didn't have an electric drill, I had to wait for maintenance to come out it back on. My boss thought I was lying until I took a picture of the door lying on the floor and sent it to him. Worked at a summer camp as a manager. Had to call because one of our employees didn't show up. Former Marine. Good guy. Gave him a call on the home. No answer. Called his cell phone. Him. Hey. Sorry. I'm in the middle of a shootout. Handgun rounds and glass shattering. Me. Oh, okay. Call you later. Him. Okay, AR firing, see you later. Director asked if he was going to come in today or tomorrow and I said, I didn't ask. Wasn't going to distract him. He was okay. Turns out some people across the street started shooting each other. Some stray shots went through the window and wall while his family was eating breakfast, so he simply returned fire. Hi. Not the employer, but my sister had to call out of work once due to our neighborhood being locked down by the SWAT team. She tried to leave for work and a dude in full SWAT gear popped out from behind our garbage bins and told her to get back inside. They were all over our neighborhood, hiding out. Our neighbor had barricaded himself in his house and at the time, it was believed he had his 2 small children and was going to kill them and himself. Later we learned his wife had the kids, so they were not in any danger. But the man did end up killing himself. Very sad for our small community. Edit. This was in Colorado almost 15 years ago. Sad to hear how common this type of thing is. Not an employer but the employee. Got pulled over on my way to work one morning. Officer comes up and informs me that there is a warrant for my arrest that was issued a few days after I was pulled over and they found my weed pipe. They took it and let me go. 3 months later I'm finding out they still wanted me. Anyway, cop is cool after I explain I'm on my way to work. Have my cousin in the car with me as we work together. He lets me go to drop my cousin off on the condition that I immediately turn myself in. I proceed to work and walk in. Straight to my supervisor and it goes a little something like this. Me. Hey, I'm not going to be able to stay today. Him. You're already here. What's up? Me. Hey, I gotta go to jail. Him. Do what now? Me. Got pulled over. Turns out I have a warrant. Got to go turn myself in. Him. Okay. Just let me know how it goes. See you tomorrow. Me. We will see. Went okay. I did get to work the following morning. Construction workers are a dodgy bunch. One morning when I checked in, I saw an employee smoking his cigarette in front of his car. He was early so had time to do so. Well, a police car started to pass in front of him really slow while looking at him like he was a goddamn psychopath. The dude thought it was a good idea to wave them hello. Cops stopped their car and jumped out to control him. They checked the exterior of his car, his paper and such for about 30 minutes and told him they had to wait for the National Police to check the interior of the car. So they call in. National Police answer them that they'll be here in about an hour. So here they are. The three musketeers. The dude and the two cops. Standing here in the middle of a parking lot. Not talking. Not doing anything for an hour except staring at each other. National Police come in. Check the car. Nothing to see and oh nothing to be alarmed of course. So they ask the city cops what the hell is that about. Which they answer he waved us hello. Easy to tell that National Police wasn't glad to come down for such BS. Employee is finally released after 2 hours and a half of nonsense. Employee didn't have to explain it as manager saw everything. He was noted late with that cause. Waving hello to police officers. Now everyone of our place who see thought cops wave them hello. Edit. As it seems to be the very first question in many mind that happened in France. I walked in late to work once and my boss asked me why I was late. I told him this is how long it took me to convince myself to come in. He chuckled and walked away. Once I was late because of traffic. So I texted my boss in a standstill on the highway. I'm jammed up on highway and will probably be a half hour late. He texted back, yes, I see you. I'm in the green Ford Focus a few cars back of you. My dad once left work because my mom had started bleeding heavily with no lady products to take care of it and she had 2 small children at home. He told his boss my wife's basement is flooding. His boss, also his uncle, said you live on a slab. Yeah bye. I had a guy phone in to say he had a hard on that wouldn't go away. He'd been out partying and got told that when you've already had a couple of E and you're drunk, that Viagra has the same effect as more E. He swallowed a handful and ended up erect for about 48 hours. I vividly recall hearing him tell me, I've had about 15 wanks and it still won't go away. He broke his arm trying to start his truck. His normal car wouldn't start so he decided to drive his Model A Ford to work instead of being around with the car. Well, the electric starter on the truck wasn't working so he decided to hand crank it. I guess it being early and him being rushed and frustrated made him less than careful with the whole procedure. The crank snapped back and broke his arm. He's feeling sad. It was going to be a busy day at the hotel so we went round to his house to sort it out. It did sound like a BS excuse tbh. Found him lying face down in his room, unwilling to move. He had a little switchblade as well on the table which we immediately took away. He quit the job shortly after and even though I tried my best not to show it, that incident really shook me. First time I'd ever seen the effects of depression, especially to someone who we had been hanging out with and never ever expected from. I hope he's better now. I had just hired a new prep cook, about a week in. I was driving into work and I passed a truck pulled over on the highway, and a guy running back to it carrying something in his hands. He looked vaguely familiar. Anyways, I get to work, go through the motions. 20 minutes past the time he was supposed to arrive. I called him up to see what was going on. He said, sorry, I had to stop and take care of something important. The way he hesitated made me suspicious. I asked if he drove a red Ford. Yay. I respond with, did I see you picking up roadkill this morning? Turns out, he saw a dead raccoon, picked it up, drove it back home. Fast forward to a week later and he's got a raccoon skin mounted on his truck dash. I'm a recruiter, and not too long ago I called a candidate that had applied for a position I had listed. He never called me back. I called the next day and his wife answered. She said when I called yesterday she went to tell him his phone was ringing and found him dead. Employee rather than employer. My true but unbelievable excuse for being late to a meeting was, I was stuck on the highway behind a gazebo. I still can't believe a slow moving gazebo was blocking me on the road. Worse, the whole time I couldn't think of anything but the angry gazebo story over and over. I was the employee that was late. A truck that was transporting bees got in an accident on the freeway, overturned. and released most or all of the bees from it. They were trying to contain some of them, but I believe they lost most of them. This was about a half hour north of Seattle. A lot of people were late that day. One morning I went to open the door to my apartment and the knob came off in my hand. The shaft came with it, so the outside knob fell off as well. After 30 minutes of jabbing at it with a screwdriver, I called a locksmith, and then my boss to explain to him that I would be late because I was locked in my apartment. Had an employee call in sick a few years ago. His illness? Blue balls. Yes. He told me he had blue balls cause he was ducking around with some chick who wasn't letting him finish and he was in too much pain to work. In all my years I have heard some lame things, but this was too funny not to be true. So, I told him to stay home and had his shift covered. I taught an exercise class for the Y. I had to tell the cops to call my boss as they took me in for felony kidnapping my own kid. Custody dispute completely mishandled by the cops. No charges after I spent the night in jail. My boss actually took the time to call my friend from the gym who was a lawyer, so that was pretty cool. She also let me dress as an escaped prisoner that Halloween, as a joke. Working at a jewelry store in Australia that has an annual Crazy Day sale where they have items for sale from $1, including diamond rings, all legit products. They are on display in the windows for about 2 weeks prior, and all staff are rostered on for opening at 8:30 am. The manager telling everyone you better be dead or in hospital to not be here. Early in the morning of the day of the sale I'm rushed to hospital in an ambulance. Horrid chest pains, throwing up, fever the works. At about 7 am I asked the nurse if she could please call my boss to let her know. The nurse called, and my boss accepted. Why? Moving on. 2 days later I go into work, and my boss calls me outside for a meeting. He says to me, out of all the people who work here, only you would take my words literally. Have the rest of the week off, with pay. Best boss ever. Had a soda bottle lodged in his anus. I can't come in. There's a bear on my porch eating my pet chicken. A bad case of anal glaucoma. He couldn't see his ass coming into work. Damn. The majority of these stories are sad as duck. I came in here expecting laughter. My mom has had the excuses of being late because there was a house in the middle of the road. Some people down the street literally bought a house and moved it to their land, and a cow blocking the road. This all happened in a matter of a week. I had an employee who had an ingrown hair. Turns out he was rushed to hospital. Had a very badly infected abscess and the infection had spread to his blood. I now feel sorry for laughing when he told me his excuse for not coming in. I really thought he was joking with me. Not the employer, but once I had to ring in work because I had fallen cleaning my ear with one of those ear cotton buds. Bad for you, I know, but they just feel so damn good. And I had to go straight to the emergency doctors. Luckily no lasting damage, but I had awful hearing and dizziness for weeks. I was the employee. I have several severe food allergies that are hard to avoid and got sick. Called in and my boss didn't believe me and said show up or you're done. I showed up and then I was sent home because my supervisor said I wasn't capable of working. This happened twice in 2 weeks, and then the third week I broke my ankle. Boss said she didn't care if I missed another day, I was fired. So I worked and didn't go to the doctor's office until my next day off. Not an employer at the time, but had a testicular inflammation. Basically, during the night, in less than 12 hours, my left nut swelled to the size of a large fist and felt about the same as a large fist in the bowel sac. Went to the doctor, got painkillers and antibiotics, and dropped by work to pick up my computer and told them I'd work from home for a week or so, as, even though we didn't have an explicit dress code, pants are kind of implied. They saw how pale my face was. This was before the painkillers had kicked in, and I was having a cold sweat from pain. So my boss just said go home. Come back when you are okay. Personally, I think they were just intimidated by me having the largest balls in the company.